Welcome to the Grief Pod with Venetia Quick. This is a weekly podcast which looks at every aspect of something which has or will at some point affect us all. And that is grief. Whether you've lost a loved one or about to lose someone you know, or perhaps you're simply trying to help someone navigate their grief and don't know where to start or what to say, then perhaps this is the podcast for you. Each week I'll be bringing you different stories and experiences of loss, love, hope and at times humour. One of Ireland's most beloved singers, Christy Dignam, lost his very long battle with cancer almost 2 years ago. On this week's podcast, his daughter Kiera joins me to talk about life after losing the legend that was her dad. Thank you, Kiera, for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
I suppose, first of all, we're coming up next month to the end of the second year.
Yeah.
Now, the second year for most people, which often people don't tell you, is often a lot tougher, I
knew
think.
you were going to say that.
Yeah. Than the first.
Yeah.
How have you found that?
That's becoming apparent rapidly.
Yeah.
The only way I can kind of articulate it is when you're in the first year, you're kind of saying this time last year, we were saying like he was just after coming home from hospital and different things, and I might have a photograph, your memory might come up on your phone, things like that. Whereas this time last year, we don't have it this time last year because he wasn't here this time last year.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? And also the fact that it's time moving on, and it's a very, very definite time moving on, because there isn't that this time last year, or the most recent photo is 2 years ago. Yeah,
and there's no more, like, all the photos I've seen. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to find any new, there's no new photographs anymore. There's no new conversations anymore. You kind of, like with me, if I write a new song, I would automatically go to him and say, what do you think? And he might give you an idea on like lyrics to change or production or vocals. I don't have that anymore. So things like that make you realise very quickly.
Yeah, that
he's gone.
That he's not going to get any older.
Yeah, that freaks me out. I remember about 2 weeks after he died, I was driving down the Navan Road and I saw an old man walking down the road, and I just fell to pieces because I was like, he's never going to be an old man. Yeah. Like and these are the things you don't think of until you think of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And you do, I think, I know certainly in my situation with my kids, you don't, and you've kids.
Yeah.
And you sort of think, sometimes you wonder, as your kids get older, what would the relationship be between your dad or their dad and them now?
Yeah, and like he was very, very close to my kids. I'm an only child.
Yeah.
So my kids were kind of an extension of the kids he never had type of thing. And because he was that bit older and he wasn't as, like, he was gigging in Ireland for a lot of the time. He wasn't away as much as he would have been when I was a kid. So he was able to be more present for my kids. And obviously, I mean, without getting into all that, obviously he had struggles when I was growing up. He tried to make up to me through my kids with that, for time that he felt, not that I felt, but time that he felt he needed to make up to me, or things he needed to make up to me. He made sure he was a good grandfather. So the kids were very, very close to him. But as you say, looking now, like, Keen is 21 now, Ava is 17, Jake is 11, but Jake's entire life my dad was sick. So although he was very close, he didn't get a lot of the time that mainly Keen would have got. Yeah, because he wasn't healthy for that time. Like, he was diagnosed in 2023. Jake was born in 2013. Jake was born in 2014. So literally his entire life. Now, he always made a point of making the effort, but like the likes of football or little things like that, where you would need actual effort, like to make an effort.
He didn't have the energy to go. Yeah, and I think, isn't it true that often your own parents are much more not involved, but sort of they have a special relationship with the grandkids, and especially the first grandchild.
Yes, because they don't have to say no.
Yeah, exactly. And they can go home.
Exactly. It's like, give you all the sweets. The kids are bouncing off the walls, and they're like,
they walk out the door. Yeah.
And you're like, I'm left to deal with this.
Yeah. Was that the sort of granddad he was?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Like, on a Sunday, we would always go down. We'd have a fry up or whatever Sunday morning. So he'd go and say, right, I'll go up and get fresh bread or fresh rolls. And he always had to have a newspaper on a Sunday like, oh, I haven't bought a newspaper since he died. Because some mornings, if he wasn't well, he'd ring and say, will you pick up the paper on the way? Little things like that. That's actually the first time that's occurred to me, that I just say that. But little things like that. And if he was going up, he'd say, right, Jake, jump in the car, and he'd bring him up. And you're talking like, because I could be gigging on the Saturday night and my mum would be babysitting. So the Sunday morning, we'd go down for the fry. And Jake would be in his pyjamas. He's like, I'll just jump in the car. And he'd come home. He'd come back down with like, you know, these like fizzy tongue licker things.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. So yeah, he was absolutely one of those granddads. Or a magazine the child's never going to read, but it costs like €7.
Yeah,
and I'm
because
like,
it's a plastic toy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you doing? And it's broke by the time he opens it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the granddad he was.
Wow. And I mean, it must be for your mum as well. Like, they were together since they were 13.
Yeah.
So for her, this constant in her life, her best friend, somebody that really she possibly doesn't remember life without.
No, I don't think she does. Like, she does say she was with him longer than she was with herself. You know, so it's, like, wow. Although you try to take on board what that must be like, you can't. Like, you can't, like, I'm with my husband since I was 16, so I understand what it is to have that best friend and your life. But we've been together 23 years, and that feels like my entire life. They were together for like over 50.
Wow.
Like, that's amazing. Like, there's a loss and there's that kind of loss. And then on top of that, she was his carer, you know, so you're not only losing your partner and your best friend, your husband, you're also kind of like, what do I do now? Like, we brought him home and looked after him at home ourselves. You know, we had the help of a carer as well who would come in, you know, the kind of medical type of stuff that you would need help with, or things that you didn't want myself and my mum or my husband Darren doing, you know. So, but we could, myself and Darren could go home. She did, like, she was at home. That was her entire life. She had to leave work to help look after him. So there's also that aspect that people don't warn you about.
That's a huge emptiness
for
her, because it's like when somebody's in hospital that's close to you, and yet you go up every day, or you go in and out every day. When that's gone, it's so structured into your day
it's your
that
routine.
You go, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And it's in one way, it's another, I think, challenge or hurdle to deal with than if somebody dies suddenly, because there's this gaping hole in your day-to-day life.
Yeah. I don't think there's any best case scenario with death.
No.
Like, I've never lost somebody very, very quickly. I've never really lost, like, I've lost grandparents and things like that. But you're kind of not prepared, but you kind of think, well, kind of getting old, this is going to happen. But I think, it is that kind of gaping hole where you're like, if something happens quickly, although it's an unbelievable shock, I'm sure. As you say, when you have a routine, then it's kind of what? Like, I had a routine where I was helping out in my mum's salon because she couldn't go to work, and then I'd go down and help out in the house, or like I'd go down and say, right, I'll bring him for chemo today, or Darren would bring him to chemo, or like let my mum go do our banking, like, because you still have to live and pay your bills and all of those things. So I'd go down and say, right, I'll babysit today, and he'd be like, don't be so stupid, I'm grand now. Especially in the last couple of months, he could not be left alone, but he was still, you know, obviously he still has his pride, and he's still a man, and he doesn't want his daughter coming babysitting him, but that had to be the case. So then when you haven't got that, you're kind of going, it's 2 o'clock. What do people do? And
how has your mum dealt with that? How is she, I suppose you can't say fill the void, but how has she sort of bridged that?
I don't think she has yet, to be honest. Like, as you said, it's almost 2 years now. She still hasn't, to be honest. Like, some days she's back in work. She works 4 days a week, and then the days that she's off work, she'll try and occupy herself with the garden, and like she loves her garden. But we're lucky enough that we've good weather at the moment. But in the winter time,
it's very dark.
It's dark and in more ways than one.
Your dad, of course, like you were saying, you're an only child. Mm-hmm. So he was a huge presence in your life.
Yeah.
How, he's not at the end of the phone. You can't sort of send him videos of your kids or your gigs. How difficult have you found that to navigate?
I find that very difficult. And I've heard other people speaking about that, even before he died, speaking about when they're in a grief process where you pick up the phone. Or like I might see a singer that you know, I'll hear a song or I'll hear a new singer and I go, oh, my dad love him, or my dad hate him, you know, because either way we have a strange kind of dark humour in our family. So like that, if there was something that I'd think my dad find that really funny, or my dad would hate that person, not me hate it, you know what I mean, where you'd be kind of, oh, you'd cringe,
you'd know their reaction to somebody, or say something that would happen,
like even
like Trump
stupid
getting in again. You know?
Exactly. And like I kind of little things like you might see on TikTok, like he'd have loved TikTok because there's, you know, all those little clips like babies laughing, things like that. He would sit looking for hours, or babies falling, you know, little things where they're not hurting themselves but it's funny, you know, things like that. Those were the kind of videos. If I see one of those videos, I'm like, I have to send that to my dad and go, I can't send that to my dad.
I think that's one of the toughest things to actually deal with. And it's also because you're dealing with what the loss of him, that he'd be the person that you go to for help. So it's sort of a double-edged
it's
sword,
like
in a way,
triple-edged if that's possible. It is, because, and like even advice, as I said, with my music, I would go to him with anything in general, even if I just wanted to rant about Darren or about the kids, or, you know, he always had a way of kind of, if I kind of would have it, say a little argument with Darren, and he'd be like, well, what's going on? Tell me what you did. He always had a way, because Darren's around so long, and he used to call him the son he never had, where I would kind of, like, he'd always have me back, but he would still always say, well, I think you need to see it from Darren's side as well. And I'm like, shut up. You know, you need to have, I'm your daughter. But, you know, and sometimes I needed that. Because he would have been right. Yeah. You know, and like, times when I was wrong, or I was over exaggerating, or I was, you know, just being stupid about things, ridiculous about little arguments, or just needing advice in general, he'd have a way of saying, well, look, let's simplify it and look at it this way. And when you don't have that anymore, now I try to think, what would he do? What would he do? What would he say? And Darren is very good at that. Whereas I can get clouded, Darren is very good at saying, you know what your dad say? And I'm like, I don't. And he'd say, well, he'd say this. And then it's like, yeah, you're right.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's good to have him that I can.
And it's lovely for you to have that bond with him that he had with your dad.
Yeah, because he knew him so well. So he did, like, they were friends as well. And he would have, like, any charity gigs and stuff. You know, people had asked me dad to go and sing a couple of songs. Darren would always go and play guitar with him. Darren plays in my band. So they would have had hours in the car and things where it was separate to myself and my mum and the kids. They had their own little relationship.
Your dad was sick for 10 years? Yeah, on and off. So during that time, I'm sure you had plenty of Lazarus moments where you thought, this is it. Yeah. And then he's back. Yeah. And then this is it. And he's back. Mm-hmm. And I know with my own dad, that was the case, where he just always got COVID in hospital, aged 81. We were like, okay, this is it. Yeah. Ah, no, sure it wasn't. You know, this sort of ongoing back and forth, which can be quite difficult for the other person, because you start to get resigned to the fact that this is imminent or on the cards, and then it doesn't happen. So there's all that emotional back and forth where you're grieving already before the person is gone.
Yeah, I actually was thinking about that. I remember saying that not long after he died. I remember thinking that, and that wasn't something, although people say you're never prepared, but you know, people who may have been through a loss, I never really understood what that meant, to grieve somebody who was still alive. But I absolutely understand that now. It's when I look back on it, we were so prepared. Well, we thought we were so prepared for him to die, and like that, like you said, with so many close calls. Like when he was diagnosed initially, it was on St. Patrick's Day, which fell on a Sunday, and I was getting married 14 weeks later. So my dad was the type, he didn't want to hear it. Which I'm sure a lot of people, I think I would like, or give me all the details. Yeah. I want to know everything. What time will I die? Yeah. Whereas my dad was like, don't want to know. Yeah. Tell them. He didn't want any information. So he started getting the doctor wanted to come in and talk in front of him, and he's like, listen, I don't. He kept getting up, going to the bathroom, and we were kind of getting frustrated because we were like wanting him to answer questions. So eventually Darren said, listen, I'll sit with Christy, can you go outside? So we went into a room with the doctor, and I basically said to the doctor, like, what are we dealing with here? Like, I'm getting married in 14 weeks, will he be okay for that? And the doctor said, well, to be honest with you, tomorrow's a bank holiday, so we haven't got, we won't be starting treatment tomorrow. If he's here on Tuesday, we will start chemo. So
As in, like, if he's here in the hospital?
Well, these are the things, when you're in your mind, go, what does that mean? So I was like, what do you mean? Do you mean he could be home by then? He's like, no, if he's alive on Tuesday. So I was like, what?
Wow.
Yeah.
So this is Sunday.
This is Sunday. If he's alive on Tuesday, we'll start chemo. And I'm asking, will he be at my wedding in 14 weeks? Will he be okay for my wedding in 14 weeks? That's when I realised he might not be. So that was tough. So from then, for a long time.
So immediately you're going into the worst case scenario.
Oh, of course.
And that huge, because that emotion also is really, really exhausting.
Yeah. Because you're kind of thinking, suddenly now this big wedding that I had been planning for 18 months doesn't matter anymore. But it is kind of still there. So then I was like, I don't want, you kind of leave the run up to the last kind of couple of months in your wedding. That's when you do certain things where it's like there's like booking the band and the venue is done at the beginning, but there's certain things that you have to wait for. And I wouldn't organise my cake, I wouldn't organise a honeymoon, things like that. And it was actually him got in my ear, he's like,
do it,
sort your honeymoon, I will be at your wedding, I promise you I'll be at your wedding. And I believed him, and he was. Well,
and because even in those times, like even doing the washing or emptying the dishwasher, becomes such an obstacle because the other is so all-encompassing. That's all you can think about.
Yeah, your perspectives totally change. And you kind of, I think in a situation like that where you have somebody who is diagnosed terminally ill, or unfortunately when they pass away, your priorities absolutely change. And it's like things like that. You look at dishes and you think, that's not important. I'll do it later. You know, now you have to obviously be very careful because you can fall into a hole where you don't want to get dressed. Like there are some mornings I don't want to get dressed, and there are some mornings I don't. But you do have to sometimes say, okay, you have to know there's a very, very, very fine line where that gets very, very unhealthy. So I kind of throw myself into my work. And a lot of people have kind of passed judgment or comments where it's kind of, guys, you've done an awful lot, or how can you do that when you're like your dad just died? Because I brought my album out. My album was ready to go, but I put it on hold when he came into palliative care because I wanted to be there and not be preoccupied by any of that. So when he died, I decided in the October, he died in the June, I decided the October I was going to release it because I needed to throw myself into something. I needed a focus.
The distraction.
I absolutely did, and I still do. So that's what I'm just constantly trying to work, because it keeps me in full-blown denial, and I need to be that way. Now I know you have to hit a wall eventually. I've hit a few walls, but I know I haven't hit the wall yet. Yeah,
because it's so easy to sort of, it's like the kids' book. You have to go through it. Yeah. Whereas,
and I'm actively avoiding that.
And that's purpose. A normal, I think. Route to take. And then it comes to a point where
you can't anymore.
You can't sort of predict what that point will be, or something will happen. And that will be the trigger to finally having to do it. Did that grieving, sort of living grief, did that affect how you grieved after he died?
Yeah, I think that, for want of a better word, I think that probably helped with this denial that I have established, I suppose, because when you're kind of constantly, will he, won't he, is he going to be okay, is he not, you start to resign yourself to the fact that he is always going to be okay. Because it's like, well, look, he got sepsis. He got, you know what I mean? He got all of these things and was always okay. He was in liver failure, or not, heart failure, kidney failure. His cancer, amyloidosis, affected his heart mainly. So when he went for his scans, they said, right, we do know it's cardiac. So it has affected his heart. Worst case scenario, it has affected one or two other organs or one or two parts of his body. So it said it could be either his liver, his lungs, with the heart, liver, lungs, kidneys, spleen and bones. It affected all of those things with him, of course, because my dad couldn't do things half-arsed. He had to go for it all. So little things like that where you say, like, how are you still here? But he always was. So then when it comes to a point when he came home into palliative care, that frightened him, but it didn't frighten me because palliative care was just a word to me at that stage, because it was
but it's also very important that you say that, because when most people think of palliative care, they think the end, this is it, it's over. It's
end of life. And
but actually, palliative care starts well before, which a lot of people don't understand. I know, like, you freak out, you think it's the end.
Oh my God, this is the last days. And it's not like that could
They're
be
there
the
to
case.
help.
That could be the case for months and months. And with us, we were lucky enough that was the case. But there was a weekend which was turned out to be the weekend before he died. I've never actually spoken about any of this, but I suppose it's probably a good place to with the subject we're speaking about. So my mum gave us a call on the the Friday evening. She would always ring Darren's phone if something was wrong. So Darren's phone rang and it was like 11:30 at night.
Okay.
And straight away you're like, oh.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at Darren, and sometimes I say, put your phone on loudspeaker so I can hear what she's saying. But that night I was like,
don't.
Tell me.
Yeah.
Tell me, I don't want to hear it. So he had a fall, and she's like, I can't get him up off the floor. So can you come down and help me? So Darren flew down to the house, helped her, lift him up. We had only left a couple of hours beforehand. So anyway, Darren lifted him up, and he just kept apologising to Darren. That's the one thing that sticks with Darren. He's like, he just kept saying, I'm sorry about this, I'm sorry about that. Darren's like, don't be so silly. So we got him up anyway. At this stage, he was in the front room. We had a hospital bed and everything. So when he got him into the bed, he had hurt his back. So Darren's like, will we ring an ambulance? He's like, no, I'll be fine, let me sleep on it. Next morning, he was in a lot of pain, but he would always play that down because he was terrified of going into hospital because he didn't want to die there. And I think, in hindsight, he probably knew this was kind of happening. So the carer came down that morning, and he was saying, like, sounds like he's a little bit of a heavy chest. So then we were thinking he might have, we reckon he cracked his coccyx when he fell. But because he was so thin, when he fell, his chest he got a bang, and his chest was quite sore as well, so he was struggling to take deep breaths. So his breathing was quite shallow, but he had a little bit of a noise, I suppose. So we were thinking, is he after getting a little, infection or something? Because like that, you get infection so easily at that stage.
Yeah.
So the Saturday evening we went down, and he wasn't great. He was like, I'll be fine, kept brushing it off, never ever complained, ever. So we went home. We were like, give us a ring if there's any issues. Like 8:15 Sunday morning, my mum rang me. She's like, I'm up all night with him. He made me promise not to ring an ambulance. I promise not to ring you, because he kept saying, if you ring Darren, he'll make me go to hospital, and he would have.
Yeah.
So we went down, we sorted the kids out, and we knew this wasn't good. And we're coming past, my mum and dad lived just off Navan Road, we're coming past the church we actually got married in, and I remember Darren saying to me, Kiera, when we go down here, he said, like, it was like we didn't talk about the fact that we knew why we were going down, but we both knew. And he said to me, if he's sick enough that he needs to go back into the hospice, I'm going to suggest that. Because he had been in the hospice a few weeks earlier and came home. I'm like, who comes home from a hospice? We brought
my
him
granny.
Well, and my dad. So there you go. Like, you bring them there thinking, right, this is it. Like, I remember walking out the door behind him saying, this is the last time he'll be in this hall. This is the last time he'll be in his garden. And then he came home, because it was a thing of he did not want to die in a hospice or a hospital. So I was saying, Darren, I had to have my dad's back on that, because I was like, he doesn't want to die in a hospice.
Yeah.
I'm not letting him go back. And Darren's like, if he's too sick and he needs that, we don't have a choice. So I walked in like, okay, I'm going to have his back on this, because I know that he doesn't want it, and I'll fight me mama and Darren if they're trying to get him up there. So I went in and sat down. I was like I know he's going to say no, and I just have to back him up. So Darren said, Christy, do you think maybe you should go back to the hospice? So I looked at my dad like, right, we've got this. And my dad's like, yeah, maybe. And I was like, are you winding me up? I was like, I'm about to fight your corner here. So I was like, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, do you think you need to go? Because obviously I wasn't going to like keep him there if it was going to be, if it was going to make him worse,
choice.
of course. But at the same time, I was like, I was trying to be strong here, thinking I had your back. So then he said yes. And then I was like, I realised he was defeated then. So my mum says, look, I'm after ringing the hospice nurse, and she's going to come down at 11 o'clock. This is maybe 9:15 in the morning. So we're sitting there, and he's in the bed, and you could see he was in a lot of pain trying to take these breaths. And when the hospice nurse came, Darren and my mum are sitting across the room, and I'm standing at the top of his bed, and she came in and she just dealt with people. I don't know where they make those people, these hospice nurses.
Yeah,
but
they're
my God,
a different.
they're a different breed.
Yeah.
They really are. So she came in and everything was so gentle, and she's just rubbing his hand. She's like, how are you feeling? And this is my first time meeting you. And because the nurse that we had dealt with before, happened to be her day off. So, and she would have been real, right, Christy, come on, get up, get dressed. I mean, I was like, oh, like, you know, she was lovely, but he was like, please, because he was lazy. Yeah. On top of everything else, he was like, please, just give me a break. Where she was just, look, we'll do it. She was really gentle. Yeah. So she just said, listen, you're in a lot of pain here. I can see that you're a very sick man. And he was like, yeah, okay. And he kind of was in that much pain. He didn't really have the energy. He was just like, yeah, okay, whatever you say. So she says, listen, I have a little machine that'll help you with your medication, and I have that in my car. I'm gonna bring it in. So I'm standing there like, a machine. So she went out to her car, and I could see my mum getting a bit upset. So I walked out afterwards, after her, and I stood at the hall door until she came back in. So I says, can I ask you a question? She's like, absolutely, whatever. Any questions you have, let me know. I says, when you say machine, I said, are you saying you're putting me down the pump? Because I've heard of a pump when people dying. I've never heard of it being called a machine. Now it is obviously a machine, but you know, your head is not in it. So she said, yes, I'm putting him on the pump. And I was like, hang on a minute. Because as far as I was concerned, anybody I've ever heard being on the pump, that's your hours, days at max. So I was like, hang on a minute. I was like, he just fell. Like, he just had a fall. So this goes back to, he's always going to be okay. Yeah. This is when I started realising, now hang on a minute, you're trying to kill my dad. He's fine, he fell, you know. And she pulled me in, she got my hand and she pulled me into her and she says, Kiera, your dad is actively dying. And I swear to God, she may as well have got a double decker and rammed it straight into my face. Like, I remember even that feeling now. I feel sick even saying it because I remember that feeling. And I said I wasn't going to upset, and now you're making me get upset.
Sorry.
Apology accepted. No, it was. I remember I thought my legs were going to buckle. Yeah. And I was standing in the hall, and I remember holding onto the banisters because I was like, "What am I going to tell my man, Darren?" Because at the time, like, obviously they knew. I was the one that was in denial, I suppose, and was trying to avoid reality. So she came in and I could see my mum was upset still. So she's like, okay, Christy, I'm going to just get your medication. I'm going to walk through what you need here and I'll get this sorted. So she says to Darren and my mum, come on outside and we'll have a chat. Because she didn't want to talk in front of him. So she brought us out the back and she's like, so I was like, she's saying like he's actively dying. And my mum's like, yeah, I thought that. And I was like,
isn't that weird though, when you sort of, you get yourself worked up to sort of tell the other person because you want to protect them, and they actually are going, yeah, well, I realise that.
Yeah, and I'm like, when was anyone planning to share this information with me? Because I've been oblivious to what I was under the impression he had a fall. Yeah. Do you know, now it turns out when we look at it now in hindsight, I suppose I thought that he fell and that's kind of essentially why he died. But he was dying and that's why he fell. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. He was weak, and it's only now in the last couple of months when I'm reflecting on it I realise that. So when she said that to us, my son was at a festival in England with his friends. He had gone on the Friday and he was coming home on the Monday. This is the Sunday morning. So Darren said, my son is away, should I get him home? And she's like, yeah, you need to get him home. And I was like, hang on a minute, he's back tomorrow night. I was like, don't be pulling him all the way home. Tomorrow night. And she's like, Kiera, he might not be here tomorrow night. Like, if Kim wants to be here to say goodbye to him. And I was like, do you think that he might? She said, look, I can't tell you when he's going to go, but he's a very sick man. She said, he could be here tomorrow, but he probably won't. Again, she reversed her bus over me at that stage. Yeah. So I was like, give me a break. Yeah. But so we rang Kane, obviously heartbroken, and he's in England, and what can I do? I can't get to him. So his friends were amazing. They stayed, like, they didn't go to the festival that day. They waited with him until he got a flight organised and he flew home. And I was just thinking, oh my God, he's coming home on his own. Yeah. You know, all the finding out that and coming home on his own, as I said, they're really close. So Ava at this stage was 15. So we basically called the two of them and said, do you want to be here? We're not going to make you be here. I also don't want to tell you you're not allowed to be here. Jake wasn't an option. He was 8.5. So we basically just said to Jake, Grandad's very sick, you can come and see him. So he sat with him, and that rattle was getting worse, which we thought it turns out was the rattle people talk about. So Jake was sitting with him, and he was able to sit with him for a few minutes, and then we sent him to my sister-in-law's. So she just kind of kept him playing and oblivious with his cousins. So I was happy enough to know he was away, and Kiena and Ava decided they wanted to be with us when he died. So I was like, right, maybe do you want to sit with your... Keen came home. I said, do you want to sit with your granddad? Maybe he's very weak, he might not talk much. So I went up to my house to get a few bits, and I walked in and I heard him really, really, really chatty. And I was like, it was like he was 2 weeks before.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm about pulling him home from England. Yeah. Like, I'm not dragging him home.
But it is that sort of, it's the last sort of
I know.
bit of
I know that now.
energy.
At the time, I was thinking, oh my God. I was like, Kian is going to be like, are you winding me up, pulling me out? I could have been still over there and it'd have been grand tomorrow night. But you're right, that was the case. He had his energy, and I think he was pushing himself to sit and chat to Ava and Kian and to have that conversation. And then he kind of, it weakened him more. But since then, having spoken to them after that, I just say to Kian, are you glad you had that? And he was like, oh my God, like this is thinking about it now, if I had to come home on the Monday, I wouldn't have had that conversation, because when he did get, by the Monday, he didn't die till the Tuesday, but by the Monday you couldn't have had a conversation with him really. He was very, very weak. It was just kind of words here and there. So I am glad that they had that. It was very important they had that.
I'm thinking here as well, just when you're saying your son was away, aside from all of this and the shock of this is happening for real this time, and it's imminent, you also had to micromanage a whole different side. Yeah. And that would be media. And because I remember at the time, if this is okay to say, I remember there was a bit of speculation when in the run-up to your dad passing away, in the press and online, because we hadn't been seen for a while and everything had sort of gone quiet. You had to get your son home from England knowing this was happening. Meanwhile, sort of the people speculation, shall we say, are ready to pounce in a way. Yeah. How did you contain that?
I have no idea. It was very, very hard. And to be honest, I think now that it's all in the past, I think it's almost, I'm probably over exaggerating when I say this, but it's almost like a PTSD, if that makes sense, because when you're dealing with a death, it can be very, very traumatic. I'm also trying to take that aspect on, and it was, I can't explain how hard it was. Like, as you say, a couple of months before, there was a little bit of speculation, because we had announced he was in palliative care, and the reason we did that was because there was a Tree Arena gig that was supposed to be happening. That's it. And we had to just let people know, listen,
we can't do it.
You can't do it. And it wasn't right to kind of string people along and allow them to continue to buy tickets when this gig isn't, it's never going to happen, and if it does, he's certainly not going to be there. And my dad was always very, very honest with his fans, and I wanted to allow that to be the case in this situation, as keep as much privacy as we could, but also just be honest with people. So a couple of weeks later, it was announced that he died when he didn't. So I had to go down and tell him. I was like, listen, Dad, I just want to let you know, because he was still getting his papers and he was still on his phone.
How did he feel about that? What was his reaction?
Well, he'd died about 6 times before. Yeah. So he was kind of used to it. Yeah. But I just had to listen. I just want to let you know you passed away this morning. He was like, really? Because I feel... I mean, it is. You have to laugh. If you don't, what else do you do? I was like, yeah, just to let you know you passed away this morning. I'm not sure where, not sure
what
how.
What was his response to that?
He's like, what? Again? I was like, yeah. Because there was a man who happened to be called Christopher Dignam. Now, there's loads of Dignams. Yeah. Very few Dignams. Yeah. Unless they're our family. Yeah. And there had been a Christopher Dignam who happened to live on the Navan Road. Okay. Weirdly enough, a couple of years earlier, who passed away. It was an elderly man, and we obviously went into the papers that my dad died, and my dad was like, "No, I'm fine." Now, this is way before he got sick, and then we were concerned because we were saying, like, that's a family who have actually lost somebody, and that's kind of almost taken away from their grief, and that's not fair. And then in the end of January of the year my dad died, my little cousin died, who was also Christopher Dignam. He was 27. So that went kind of Now, it was quickly caught on that it was his nephew that died. But, like, I remember somebody getting on to my auntie, sending my auntie, who's my dad's sister, a message saying, hey, I'm so sorry, I heard about Christy, what a legend. And she was like, oh, look, sorry, it was my son, not me brother.
So she...
Yeah, and this person replied saying, oh, thank God, at least, thank God it wasn't Christy. She's had to lose her 27-year-old son. This is, do you know what I mean? Like, it's mental how people can think, oh, at least it wasn't Christy. Like, she's to bury her baby.
But I mean, doesn't that show the difference between the person, the human person, and the show person or the public person?
And I think that's the problem. I think some people, like, the support you get off the public is absolutely incredible. And even with me in my career, apart from his death and all of that, like, you do genuinely, I have to say, we get amazing support. But there is that kind of nasty aspect of it where people do kind of forget that you're human. Like some of the comments that I've gotten online since my dad died has been horrific. And like I say, going back to when you were saying about having to prepare for his death, people don't take that into account. Like, I'm in shock. I'm about to lose my dad, one of my best friends ever in my entire life. And I have to sit. I remember Darren saying to me on the Sunday night, maybe you should work out a statement for when he dies. And I was like, I don't want to think about that. And he's like, but you need to be realistic here. This is something you're going to have to. He said, and when it happens, you're not going to be in a headspace to do that. And I had to sit and work out how I'm wording his death announcement. And he's sitting beside me. That's traumatic. Like, I don't even know the word. Traumatic's probably not the word for that.
I mean, there is no word, because, like, you're sort of willing them away.
Yeah. So I literally had to have this written out. I had to get a friend to actually help me because I didn't know what to do. So I basically had a template, essentially, and I had to leave the time and the date out.
Wow.
And then
it's what a lot of newsrooms do in sort of TV or radio.
But a daughter doesn't have to.
No, exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was like, right, okay. So then when he did pass away, we were kind of sat with him for a few minutes, and then we had his music playing and stuff like that, like music he loved playing. And we walked out because, you know, you have to leave, and then the Kiera came in and just helped because the pump and everything. There's little things you have to do when somebody passes away. So we leave the room, and I'm kind of standing in the kitchen like, what just happened? And Darren said to me, Kiera, you're gonna probably have to get that statement. And I was like, I'll do it in a while. So I remember taking my phone out and getting the note. It was in my notes, and copy and pasting it and writing out the time he died and the date. And I remember my uncle was sitting there, and I showed him my phone, and I was like, does that look all right? Does that make sense? And he was like, yeah. Like, because even he was kind of going, Jesus Christ, how is this something that you have to think about now? So he said, yeah, that's it. So I was like, yeah, look, I was hoping my in an ideal world, he died Tuesday. I was hoping announce he died on Friday, have the funeral on Saturday, and we don't have to deal with a big public frenzy type of thing.
Because I remember a couple of episodes ago, I talked to Jason Rock about his dad, Dickie, and you know, that whole idea of sharing your loved one who's died, like in both your cases, your dad's, with the public, and having to grieve publicly, and whether that was helpful or whether it was intrusive.
I think people were quite respectful, in fairness, because in the death announcement, I did ask for privacy. Now I don't even think I've opened all the messages that I got, and not out of ignorance, out of just the sheer volume of them. People genuinely just wanted to send their well wishes. Some of them are sending stories about him that, you know, over the years they may have bumped into him, or how he's helped them through his struggles or his music or whatever the case may be. In that way, it was lovely. I think people weren't deliberately intrusive or anything like that, but I still just felt like I just want to be in a bubble, a black bubble where nobody. Yeah, I didn't want a circus. So the funeral director came to us. Sorry, just to go back to when the reason I didn't have, he wanted a Bowie death where he just went in a puff of smoke and nobody knew. Like, he loved Bowie, and he was like, yeah, that's the kind of death I want. But unfortunately, I had the statement ready to go in my phone, no intentions of sharing it until Friday, and he died at 4:03, and at 5:15, Darren got a call from a friend of ours, and he's like, Darren's phone was ringing, and he was like, I'm not going out. And I was like, it seems a bit weird that this particular person would be ringing. Like, normally he'd send a text.
Yeah.
I was like, answer it and just see. I said, don't tell him anything. Just see,
Yeah.
is everything okay? He's like, Darren, I just want to let you know it's out again that Christy's after dying again. And Darren's like, oh.
Yeah.
Now, how like, we're all in the house. How has this happened? So...
Did you find out?
I did. Obviously, there's nurses and there's staff from hospitals and hospices stuff coming back and forward and chatting, and it got to a receptionist who got to a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend kind of thing. But like, he's only an hour gone, and I'm now having to share this statement, which again, I was not prepared for that. So I literally just, as I said, checked, like, got to my uncle to proofread it, and I just pressed send, and that was that.
Yeah.
I had to just. So Darren called around a few people that, you know, that needed to know before we did, like his family, because you don't want to find out these things. You don't want the 7th time you hear that he died when it's actually real.
Exactly.
To find out on Facebook.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. So we told the people that needed to be told, and then I had to.
Can I ask you in this point, because just when you're saying things like that, when somebody like, and it did happen when your dad died, but when somebody like your dad dies, or somebody, you know, that has a huge sort of presence in the public eye, people rush to whatever social media they use, like Instagram or Facebook, whatever, and they suddenly have a picture with that person.
Yes.
Which we all know people that do it consistently, and it's like, you know, you might have a text with a couple of friends going, oh, so-and-so's died, wait for X, Y and Z to have a photo up.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Because there was a lot of it when your dad died.
And to be honest, I don't mind. It comes with it comes part and parcel with the job. You know, I get it. Like, that's been my entire life. I do understand that. I wouldn't kind of begrudge anybody of doing that. I would never look in a bad way to anyone who shared photographs like that. The one thing that bothered me was when he was in hospital. He was in for a good few months. He was in for like 6-7 months, and people taking photographs of him in the hospital. That bothered me. That really bothered me.
Well, that's an invasion of privacy.
Yeah. And I would be I'd be quiet. I would be quite reserved, and I would never ever be, I'm not a confrontational person at all. Like, I would be very much kind of just, yes, no problem, yes. You know, I don't want to upset people. I don't want to come across argumentative or even ignorant. I would never ever, even with myself, if it's not a good time for me and someone says, can I get a photograph or whatever, I will always do it. Honestly, it doesn't bother me. But I remember standing outside the hospital. I brought him out for a smoke, and because he wouldn't give up smoking, because he's like, well, what am I going to get, more cancer? I'm like, what do I say to that? Fair enough. So we're sitting outside the hospital, and someone's like, oh, Christy, can we get a selfie? I mean, he's like, okay. And now I had numerous arguments with him beforehand, because I'm on Facebook at home through these months, and random people are putting pictures up, like seeing Christy outside the hospital, and I'm like, oh my God. And then I'm worrying about infection and all of these things. I'm like, we're trying to keep you alive.
Yeah.
You know, just say, I'm sorry, I'm not well. Like, you can say it in a polite way. You don't have to be mean to people to turn down a photograph. But I was standing here that day, and had been a bad week, and his heart, because the cancer affected his heart, his rhythms were off, so they had to stop and start his heart this particular week. It was a rough week. And we're standing outside the hospital, and somebody comes over, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but no, you can't. And she was like, what? And I said, I'm sorry. Look, I don't mean to be rude, but the man is in a wheelchair in a hospital. Yeah. No, you can't have a photograph. So she was like, oh, okay, well, I didn't mean to upset you, but wasn't impressed with me, which I was like, I don't care. There's more important things. Walks off and just went a little bit further away and still took our selfie with him in the background. So I was like, okay. So, you know what I mean? Like, things like that.
Times,
yeah.
It's read the room.
Read the room.
You have a new EP out. You are gigging at the end of this month.
Yes.
How, for music, I guess, when you're singing songs, and, you know, I'm sure there's songs that come on when you're in the car, on the radio or whatever, on the telly, that you just can't listen to.
Yeah.
How, when you're singing or whatever, you're standing on the stage or wherever you're doing your gig, how do you manage that?
I find music to be very therapeutic. When I'm writing, I'm finding that I'm just trying to write my feelings, and that's kind of helping me through a lot of things, because it means that I don't have to physically go to a therapist. Yeah. Which I did try, and at the time I just wasn't in the right headspace. I wouldn't knock it. Some people find that it gets them through grief or traumas in general. I just felt I wasn't ready, and I still don't feel I am. So I'm finding that writing is really helpful to me. I'm finding singing is helpful to me. When it's my music, it's just I can put my energy into it. I can, as I said, I can be quite shy, but when I'm on stage, I can be somebody else. I can kind of put out this perception that I have. I'm full of confidence, and I'm not. And I can be the person I want to be, you know, on stage. I find it really helpful when it comes to my dad's music. Like, for example, the gig that we're doing on the 29th in Vicar Street, that's a celebration of my dad's life. So a lot of the songs are his songs, or they're songs he loved to sing.
And do you find you're under more pressure because they're his songs?
100%. Yeah. I find him under pressure anyway, to be honest, because people do have a preconceived...
Oh, the whole Nepo Baby.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You didn't
That's what I named the album.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I kind of thought, I'll be in on the joke. People say it anyway, so I may as well get in ahead of it. And I was strongly advised against it, because like people saying, oh no, Kiera, like you'll get people say you're being sarcastic. And I'm like, I don't care. I am being sarcastic. I am.
Yeah.
I don't mean any harm, but I am being sarcastic. But yeah, I do get that thrown at me a lot, and it kind of I'm living off his name, and I'm gigging since I was 12 years of age, and I never lived off. I never tried to kind of tug on anyone's coat strings. Of course, it comes with it. Like I would be very, even now, like. When I'm talking, I'm very handsy. Actually, now that I say that, I'm trying to set my hands.
Oh, don't worry, I threw my hands around all the time.
We would be, my entire family are like that. We are very handsy. So when I'm on stage, I'm that way. And my dad was that way. So some people will say, oh, you're putting that on the way your dad would have done it. Like, it's like saying, well, your hair is black. Yeah. Because your dad's hair was black. Yeah. There's certain things that are genetic that you can't change. Yeah. You can't. So I would be very much like him in that way. But you would get a lot of people who embrace it and say, oh, I love the hand movements. It reminds me of the way your dad was. But yeah, I with his music, when I'm performing his music, I have to kind of
separate.
I have to separate the two. So although obviously it's his music and in my head it's him, it's him singing it. I can't go there.
Is there one particular song that triggers you?
There's a couple of songs. This time I find difficult. I would... Like, we're in rehearsal now next week for the gig. And the couple of songs that I'm doing, I still have, like, they're in my head. Yeah. But there's parts where, where you go into a middle eight or there might be a double chorus, things like that. I need to know the structures of those before I go in with the band. And I'm thinking, I can't listen to them in order to find out these structures. I can't. Because I can't listen to his voice. I just find it's way too difficult to listen to him. There's certain songs, like, the songs that he wouldn't have even, like, Lover You Should Have Come Over by Jeff Buckley is one of his favourite songs. I can't do it. I can't listen to that song because I just automatically think of him. I would sing 5 Years by Bowie, which would have been one of my dad's favourite songs, and he sung. So I actually enjoy singing that. But I can't listen to him. Yeah.
And when a song comes on, do you just shut it off?
Gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I could be on the school run and he might come on the radio and Jake will be, because the other two are kind of old enough that they're driving themselves. Jake might be in the car. He's like, "Is that Granda?" And I'm like, "Nope, gone." Yeah, I can't. I just can't do it. I just find it too hard. But for him, it must
be, and for your kids, a huge sense of pride.
Yeah, and it is for me as well. I just struggle to listen to him.
Of course,
So I'm going to take. I mean, in 5 years' time, I might embrace it. I might be like, all I want to do is listen to him. But at the moment, I just find it too difficult. It's not helping with me denial. Do you know what I mean? It's counterproductive.
Yeah. Finally, what do you think? I mean, obviously he has, as the Irish legend, the singer, his legacy is pretty clear. But as a dad and a granddad, how would you sum up his legacy?
I think he was an amazing dad. He was an amazing granddad. I think it's something. As I said, he always kind of belonged to other people. That's the one thing that nobody knows him as a dad or as a granddad. So that's the one thing that I can kind of hold and say,
that's yours.
That's mine and that's my kids and it's my mum's and it's my husband's. As a unit, as a family unit, it's the one thing. Because we still, even his funeral, although I wanted that private, and we did have a section of a private, we had Erin's Isle where people queued and stood. And I mean, it was absolutely incredible. Although I say I wanted a private, it was amazing to have. It's the one thing that nobody can get in on, I suppose.
Yeah, it's yours.
Yeah, and I suppose that probably comes across a little bit selfish, but I was never allowed to be. I was never allowed to be selfish with my dad because
You always had to share him.
yeah, I always had to share him, and I understand. I get it. I genuinely do get it. Like as you say, he was seen as a legend, and I understand that. But sometimes, even as a 37-year-old woman, you're still a child, and that's still your daddy, and you still just want that to, as I say, that bubble you wanted that I was never allowed to have. Which again, I understand. I don't mean to come across like. You know, he's mine.
No, I think
territory.
That's perfectly natural.
Yeah, it is natural, and I think
your dad.
yeah, and I being him having that relationship and having that the door closes on a Sunday or when we're having dinner or whatever, or we go on a holiday. Because when he got diagnosed, when he was sick, we were kind of, as soon as he was well enough to be able to fly, we would always have little holidays away, and we try and stay, you know, somewhere that wouldn't be in the middle of everything, you know, we could go in, like we could drive in if we needed to, but we also had that privacy. Nobody can get to that part. So I suppose there is the legacy of the Christy Dignam legacy, of course, that's undeniable. But on a personal level, I think to have those memories that people outside our unit don't know about, that's what matters to me.
Kiera, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Grief Pod with Venetia Quick. You can listen on SoundCloud or wherever you get your podcasts. We also have an online community on Facebook, The Grief Pod, or on Instagram @GriefPod Series.